Did you just say we have a lighthouse?
Yeah, we have a lighthouse. It's my tower is a lighthouse.
I did not know that. Huh.
It doesn't really display a lot of light because it's just a fire with like a reflective kind of mirror or glass, but that's really about it.
That's how lighthouses work.
Well, like back in the day, yeah. Now it's like a giant fucking like iridescent fucking light bulb that you can see for leagues and leagues away.
I think we're good. Just making sure the sound is working.
You should get like background music for your stuff, like just like a tune that's like it's like a casual.
That is way too cheerful. Do 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 do.
Do 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 do. Do 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 do.
Still gotta be able to hear you talk, John.
And we're back.
Are we back?
Oh, we are.
Were we ever here?
We are.
Did we ever leave?
Will these questions be answered on this live stream? Stick around and find out.
I mean, Villains Talk Show with Jay Aftergood, Sara Vike, Insanieac, Jeremy McNeil, and special guest, Mr. Vanderwall.
Mr. Mm-hmm. You don't get a first name.
No.
It could be Jan. It could be Yan.
It's better to have
It could be Ian, really.
It could be Ian.
It could be Ian.
It could be Ian.
It could be JJ.
Let's just fix the camera a little. Perfect. Welcome back. Hope you all had fun time. If you're in America, the vice president debate just happened. Mm. That was fun. I don't think anyone was swayed either way. I watched the whole thing. And yeah, thank God I don't live in that dumpster fire. I live in this dumpster fire in Canada. And,
we have our own dumpster fire.
I'd much rather live up in this one. Because, damn. Good luck. Have fun with the end of your country. And, yeah. Today's guest, Jan. I went to university with him. Known each other quite a long time. Topic's going to be failure of university because both of us are university. Well, I'm a university graduate.
I'm a university dropout.
And
so am I.
We all got into
college.
We all got to the trades. I mean, Andrew and Jeremy both know they're both tradesmen in cooking, and they are doing better technically than we are. Because, like, we've had to switch to the trades because good fucking useful for my university degree. And I even have another buddy who has a degree in anthropology, and now he's a carpenter. Like, it's just, I don't...
Yes. See, why I became a cook because I was like, I need a job, and anywhere I could end up being, having a job would be great. Because anyone needs somebody to cook for them, no matter where you go.
I fell into plumbing because
everyone has a toilet.
Oh, my dad had just started a plumbing company as, honestly, part of his midlife crisis. And, kind of fell into it and discovered that I absolutely love it.
See, when I started cooking, I didn't really, enjoy it at the start. As I worked, I found a passion for it, but it took a bit of time.
Yeah. I went to school to be a teacher, went to university to be a teacher. Didn't manage to finish that, but still really want to be a teacher. So there's that. Really, the university failed me. So not I failed. Like, they didn't do what they should have for me.
And I have a political science minor with a classics of English literature major. I currently own a bar with my dad. And that's what I do with that. So much English.
Hey, John, do you post your live stream on Facebook or anything like that?
I should. I used to. I haven't.
Okay. If you do, I'll end up sharing it. So.
I will do that today. But on that note, yeah, so... I guess I'll start with my experience at university. I did 7 years.
That's a few.
Went to two of them. I started with my political science major. I wanted to be in political science. I love it. It's something I've been involved with since I was a kid. My parents have been in politics. They still are. And eventually it's funny. My professors actually got me disenfranchised with it. They always one thing I remember one of my professors always telling me. I know his name, but I won't say it here. I'll know his first name though. His name's Keith, and he said, if you're in this class or in this profession to make a difference, just leave because you're going to be crushed. Because the ability for anyone to make a difference is minuscule. The higher up you go, the biggest difference you can make is municipal politics. And that kind of stuck with me as I started watching politics unfold. And remember, this was like the transition year between 2008 to like 2016. So this was under the Obama administration that he was telling me this. And it's funny because it was all based on change, that entire administration. And it rung so true, which was kind of funny to watch. The most change that was happening was in Canada. And although I didn't like it, but it was because you could see how much power majority government actually had. And it was just kind of, like I said, it was just disenfranchising. It's hard to watch something fall apart and then want it to be your profession and be like, no, I'm good on this. So I went into my second love, which was writing. And because I wanted to go into science fiction writing, I decided to take English. I found a place in the classics of English literature. I focused on Shakespeare and Ben Jonson and John Donne and Marvell and Melville, and I found a home there, and that's how I finished my degree. And then I worked at Starbucks for 5 years because no one wants someone with an English degree. And yeah, I went to framing for a year, and I hated it. I'm not built for construction. I'm just not. And then so I went into my dad slowly teaching me business, and we went on a bar together. That's what I've been doing the last 3 years, running a bar with my English degree. What about you, Jan?
I went into university for a history degree, spent 5 years at it. My original goal was to go on to education, but I realized partway through that my grades would never be good enough to get into education, and I also realized that I was honestly not learning anything. Like, what I went in knowing is about the same level of knowledge as I left with, and realized that school's really not the for me. It's I love learning, but I can do that just as well in my own time. And
So what made you want a history degree?
It had just been.
If I may, I'll just kind of let that myth as a kid that I always believed as a kid that I would never be able to learn anything outside of school. I never thought I could until I got a lot older.
Yeah. Well, I went into history because that's kind of something that I'd always been really interested in.
It's kind of a family tradition too.
Yeah, my grandmother had a history major. My dad and my aunt both had were history majors. All of them were teachers, so it was kind of just the family tradition. And yeah, just it wasn't for me, and I left and went into trades and discovered that I absolutely loved it. I was not terrible at it. And yeah, now I'm a few weeks from going back to school, but for trades, and yeah.
And then Sarah, the only successful one.
I'm not successful.
I mean, you got a job with your degree.
I don't have a degree. Do you not know that? I don't have
No,
a
I
degree.
didn't.
So I went to school for 4 years doing a Bachelor of Education. The school, I went to school with these guys too. We all went to the same school. The school that I went to had a 4-year education degree, which is why I chose it. I wanted to get it done fast because I have wanted to be a teacher for a very long time, since like 2008. So 12 years now. Yeah, so I went to school. I worked really hard. I got really good grades. I got, honestly, my GPA is something like 3.75. I got a 4.0 GPA in all of my education classes. I worked hard. I did great. All of the teachers that I did practicums with loved me until the last one. And she and I just didn't communicate well. With the school that we went to for an education degree, the last semester that you do is a 14-week long practicum. So you spend 14 weeks attempting to work in someone else's classroom, which is very hard to do. There's a huge difference between being able to teach in someone else's classroom and being able to teach in your own classroom. And this school, this program, has a nasty habit of, about a month from graduation, telling about a quarter of their education students that they either have to quit now or they will be failed. And they did that to me. And it was very, very frustrating. I had been working really hard. I tried really hard to improve what I was doing in the classroom. But the teacher I was with, we just didn't communicate well. She was a nice enough person, but she never talked to me about anything other than her own children. And I just couldn't do it. I was so stressed out that I was losing my mind. I think Jan can testify to that. It was horrible. So I do not have a degree in education, and I really want to. And it frustrates me to no end that I worked my ass off for 4 years and have nothing to show for it. For the past 2 years, I've been working as an education assistant, which I enjoy, but it's paid like a quarter as much. And it's not the same thing, and it's not really what I want to do. So I do hope to finish my education someday, but it's very intimidating to try to go back, or there's not a lot of options of other schools that I could go to in our area with a similar enough degree. And I don't know what they would transfer, because education departments are notorious about not transferring from other schools. So that's where I'm at.
And for me, I mean, after I did my thesis, which was an 80-page paper, oh God, that took a year and a half of my life. No, I couldn't work during that because I had to study the American economy, the Indian economy of India. I mean, India economy and the Chinese economy. And basically my entire thesis was on projections of the future and all this. I put so much work into it. And then once you get your degree, they pretty much slap you on the ass and send you away. And you're then off to go find a job. And in what? I mean, with an English degree and a minor in political science. I mean, they pretty much tell you like, oh yeah, you'll find a job if you just go into politics or you go into education. And I'm thinking to myself like, well, I'm not going into politics. And I can't stand kids, so why would I go into education?
That's fair.
And so all of a sudden the thing that they tell me I'm supposed to take in university, be passionate about, just turns out to just be a flop. And now I'm not going to say how much, but I'm a lot of money in the hole,
right?
After 7 years of university, because I thought I could make something from it. Like it took my sisters, both of them have master's degrees now. And it took them master's degrees before they actually found jobs in their field. And then, even then, my one sister, it just this recent couple of years, finally, because she wanted to help the environment, and she just recently got a job working for a wind farm company, where for the last No, we're Canadian. We are Canadian, Darius. That's the best part.
Right?
All three of us are Canadian.
Born and raised.
North American, yeah. But it's not even that your fees are mad. It's like my school only cost me like about $3,000 a year. But
what?
Well, sorry, $3,000 a semester.
There we go.
Okay,
$3,000 a semester.
That makes more sense.
But even then, that's not including books.
Like,
that's
did
not
you have a way
including-
better deal than me?
That's not including my life. Like just because you get into dormitories doesn't mean you're not paying for that.
Oh yeah.
I hope you're using your university degree.
Yeah.
Because like I was trying to say, like my sister, she worked in the oil and gas field for a major oil and gas company here in Alberta for the longest time. And she hated it. Absolutely hated it. But it's what you have to do. And they don't tell you that. They pretty much, it's very, very few actual paths in university that you can do.
Yeah. Through high school, the whole thing was go to university. You can't live without a university degree. You'll get nowhere in life.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I had just gone directly into trades, I would have been more. I'd be more stable now. I would have
not the massive debt.
Wouldn't have the piles and piles and piles of debt.
Yeah.
And
can I comment on this?
Just 2 seconds. This Darius Stone in chat. Yeah, you have a psychology degree. Well, I mean, I know quite a few people that did psychology, and I don't know what your focus is, but like I know the huge thing right now. I have a lot of friends who are in child psychology and teen psychology. You have a PhD.
Ooh.
Good.
That'll do
it.
Sorry, that's what
Dr. Darius.
That's 10 years of education or close to it. I can't measure up to.
Yeah.
But like I said, you're now, because you have a PhD, I'm sure it's easier for you to find a job in what your field is. Like when you're someone like me, should I get a PhD in English? Like, what's it going to do other pave my way to working in a university? And what were you going to say, Andrew?
I was going to say for someone who has started working in trades for a lot. For me, I'm not really I've thought about other types of jobs. Like for me, I've wanted to do a job that I'm actually I have fun in all the time and I actually enjoy, I'm happy about. It's not something that it's just daily kind of shit. And being a cook or being in other trades, I find that you kind of fall into that because you're in you're kind of like the everyday blue collar man who's just, you can fall asleep just doing your job because you've done it so repetitively all the time. And it's such a lower mental kind of thought kind of job. Like cooking somebody's food doesn't require a lot of thought process. It's just
it's true.
Fries a lot of times or seasoning or searing. It can, depending on the cooking process takes time, that takes thought, but usually just cooking it itself it's a really easy thing. Whereas other trades, and for me, my whole thing is I want to make my free kind of will, or my free time is my job. I want to be able to make gaming and stuff.
But what school you went to? SAIT?
I went to SAIT. It's the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology.
So
for culinary.
What would you say is your? I mean, if you don't have to answer this question, but what would you say is your income ceiling? Like when you walk into a place and someone offers you a job, I'm not really accurate on the number of overall, but usually on a pay rate per hour kind of thing. I'm okay with talking about it. I'm usually personally for me, I'm shooting for, and this is just kind of the area that we're in. Other places obviously pay a little different depending on their city's kind of setup. But for me, I would usually shoot for the $17 to $18 an hour. If I'm getting 19, I'm a manager, hard, and I'm going hard if I can.
Yeah.
But right now I'm doing 17, and I'm a supervisor essentially. So, and if I'm hoping to get 18 once my 3 months are up.
How much did they set you up for a job after? Like, how much did they actually help you once you were done your?
I was working in a restaurant while I was going to school, so it wasn't so much like they kind of set me up in some regards, but they didn't help me find a job or give me like ideas or places to look. It was just more like my whole set of schooling for the most part was 3 weeks of a new class, and each class was a different type of cooking. Like say baking was this 3 weeks, and then the next 3 weeks is like lunch style cooking, and then the next 3 weeks is breakfast, like eggs and shit. And then after that, there's nutrition. And then 3 weeks afterwards we had a serving class. And then we had another one about wine tasting, pairing. That one was stupid as fuck. So boring. But you got to drink wine all day, so
that's pretty great.
Bad.
Like that's.
But you paid tuition to sit in a room and drink wine all day. So it depends on how you take that in your mental process.
Yeah, I suppose.
So I didn't enjoy it. I had to be really stoned to even enjoy the wine. So, but it was interesting and it was a lot of fun. But at the end of it, it was more like they pretty much set you up to become a journeyman. So that way you can go to a restaurant and can kind of flex your abilities or your position of sorts.
Okay.
But realistically, coming from the school and when I was especially in the city, there was an attitude of someone who didn't have like the go to school kind of position, like a cook who's just been cooking there for so long. There was always an attitude of a person who came from school, because a lot of the school cooks would have like a mental process of, oh, I'm so good, I don't need to do certain things, or because I've done this, I'm not going to do that menial task. I'm going to do this more important job over here.
Yeah.
You know, so like I've heard stories of guys who won't wash dishes because they came from school.
I've seen kitchens that were run by people like that, and it's not pretty.
No, it doesn't work.
I was employed by my dad for 5 months every weekend for something like 24 hours in 2 days just to clean a kitchen because it was so disgusting because the previous chefs had been like that.
Yeah, it's awful, right? Like sometimes people just don't care and they don't take care of the kitchen properly.
Yeah.
And you need your full team working on it. You can't have people who just be like, oh, well, I'm so good, I can do this. Or maybe, like, I only come here to do this, so I'm not going to do anything that matters. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's weird. And, like, even, like, I heard stories of a dude who wouldn't cut onions because he came from school. It's you're like, are you goddamn serious? Like,
but that's, see, now that's the veil of school. I mean, they tell you like, oh, I remember when I'm doing my English and political science degree, they tell you, oh, you're gonna understand stuff way more, and you're gonna be able to watch debates and be able to be part of think tanks. But really, they don't set you up for that at all. And
they didn't set us up for real work at all, like at all.
And it takes so much time out of you, and if you're not going to go forward with it, like my sisters or Darius and Chad, who if you're not going to push on with it, like at some point, bachelor's degrees are pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just like it makes me wonder what's the point of a bachelor degree, so that you can have a certificate that I hang on my wall that I look at every day and know that I'm not doing what I want. And if I had more time and more time to like sit down and not work and take money from the government to go to school, like, oh my God, I actually pursue a master's in my degree and then do what with it? I mean,
same thing you're doing now.
Like, I want to be a writer, but what does a master's degree help me with writing? I've learned more from writing by going to seminars outside of university or going to talks with
writers,
with famous writers, and having workshops than I did ever in university. And it's true. And it's funny because like the comment earlier was that, oh, we're American, but we're not. Like the fact that we're supporting a technically a subsidized education, not free, And there's things that I can do outside that are free that actually help my goals more. It's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
one of the main advantages to a bachelor degree is the implication of transferable skills to the ability to work in a framework of deadlines, applying theories to mean. And I can't argue that.
Yeah.
You got a great point there.
It depends a
But-
lot on what you are aiming to do, though.
I mean, yes and no. It's a good point in that it does show a level of competence, but having been a bar owner now for a while, like I get people who, like, because of the economy, like they've applied to me with like master's degrees, and I just need them to wash dishes. And it's like what Andrew said, there's like a level of entitlement that like expects, and like I have friends who are extremely book smart, but like if I can define street smart, they're not good on their feet. Like I've always been good with debate and just talking, and I know people who are going into politics now because they have master's degrees in politics, and they're going into actual campaigning, and they can't think on their feet. And and just to circle back to that point that Darius raised, I would say that it's almost like, yeah, these are transferable skills, but at the same time, no one's looking at my bachelor's degree. You're eating so loud, Andrew.
Yeah. So much noise.
Just trying to like unwrap a choco. So sorry.
Yeah. But it's like, thanks for that. Good job.
I had to do it one last time.
But it just becomes like no one actually looks at my degree. It becomes, oh, you have a bachelor's degree. Oh, I see you have a bachelor's degree. And I never get asked what it is, and I never get asked what's the point of it.
Yeah.
One of the big things that's going over here in the pandemic, we are having a huge emphasis on career paths to start the first year of an undergrad. You're right, too.
Where are you?
Yeah, if you want to answer that question, what region of the world you are, you don't have to be specific.
Yeah.
Just to help us understand. But I agree, though. I have heard that. And, I would argue,
Britain.
I don't want to say what football club I cheer for, but I definitely cheer for one.
Something that I notice a lot, because I work with high school the past couple of years, and I spend a lot of time with high schoolers, even outside of my work. A lot of high schoolers, go to university or go to college as a crutch, as I don't know what I want to do with my life, so I'm just going to go take this degree. And I actually think that that's really harmful for them. I advise everyone, no matter what, to take time off after high school is over.
I totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
My dad pushed me into it, and like I had to take student loans, and I'm working as a cook, and I'd rather be doing something else.
Absolutely. No, I advise everyone to take a year off, even if you're 100% sure of what you want to do with your life. I think it is so worth it to take a year and just get a job, even if it's a crappy job, even if you work at McDonald's for a year. Just get a job and find out what you like to do with your life. Because this is
have a job.
Exactly. This is the time that you learn who you are and what you want. I think it's stupid and ridiculous that we push 18-year-olds to spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to figure out what they want to do with their life when they're 18.
That's
also there's also like a really terrible attitude, because I got pushed into it, and because I went from high school, I hated high school, and when I went to college, I didn't care about my college.
Exactly.
And I spent all that money on it. And then I had to go back again for certain years, classes that I failed. And I didn't understand, and I didn't have that mental process of like paying for something that's supposed to be helping me make a career.
Just to touch back on Darius's point, he says there's a huge emphasis on career paths to start from the first year. When I entered I was saying this, I think I said it earlier, right? Like when I entered my first year, like they lay out a career path for you, like for some jobs. Like I know if you were an engineer and you went to school for engineering, you had no choice in your classes. You had everything laid out, and then they'd have your practicum laid out. and then they have the pathway laid out if you want to take your master's in engineering, or they have practicums with engineering firms, so that you can understand how you want to move on.
Yeah, same with teaching. That's the more job-oriented ones, right?
But even then, like you hear about teachers' jobs, especially here in Canada. I'm not sure how it is in the United States, in Britain. I'm so sorry.
That
must have hurt. I'm so sorry.
I have a friend who just spent 2 years teaching in Britain.
But like I can, because actually, I'll touch on another point on there. Because here they just, otherwise, if you're not part of one of those, like if you're going to teaching, it doesn't guarantee a job, because there are teachers who still come out and still can't find jobs because there's no money in it. Just to touch on...
there is money in it here. It's actually paid pretty well.
Just to touch on you being in Britain, when my sister got out of her master's in ocean sciences, she actually could only find a job as a fisheries officer in Newcastle. So for 3 years, my sister from Alberta, Canada, the middle of the country, flew to Newcastle and lived there for 3 years to hunt down British fishermen and tell them that their fish was too big or their fish was too small.
Oh my goodness.
And that's what she had to do with her master's until she decided to upgrade. And when she finally upgraded, she could finally find a job in the energy sector where she wanted. And it's funny that they have these bars to entry, because the way she'd sell to you is it didn't increase her knowledge. All she did was just focus it on something. And she didn't even focus it on the energy sector. Her whole papers were focused on whales. Yeah, you know what? She'd send me videos of her on the dock of the Geordie Shore, and she's like, "I don't know." It'd be the best snaps I've ever seen. It's like, I don't know how to talk to these people, and I would just say, just bring up Newcastle. Just say you're a fan of the soccer team, and she did. She just became used to just telling people, like, wearing around Newcastle jerseys, and then she'd automatically be in a better disposition with everyone in that city.
That's hilarious.
Thank you for asking that. I can imagine, but yeah, just to circle back, so it's funny, like the lengths that people have to go just to use their degrees now.
Yeah,
and like I haven't heard much from Jeremy about it, but I'm sure that did you go to school for cooking as well?
No, I did not.
Technology.
Ooh, lucky you. And look how far you are. You're farther than all of us.
Well, in plumbing, I'm about to...
Do you see me doing IT?
Oh, yeah, you have an IT degree. Oh, sorry. You help. You're fitting into this conversation more than I thought.
Yeah.
In plumbing, just about to go in for my first year of schooling. I've been doing it for about a year. One of the guys I worked with, he's a third year, and he was constantly coming up to me, asking questions and all that. And I'd heard from my boss that this guy had jumped directly into school as fast as he could and rushed through school as fast as he could. So, he picked, he knew a bunch of the, book stuff, but with just a year of practical experience, I had already, picked up a whole ton of the more practical stuff side of things. So yeah, I mean, for a lot of people going into specific things, I can 100% see for going into school, but I honestly think that as much as possible, practical experience beats schooling.
A lot of the time it does.
But it also depends on your learning. I mean, there's always the argument that there's people who learn differently. I mean, there
are. I'm
not good with math. That's why I didn't go into math.
Math is
That's why I can't. I look at graphs and I just see lines on paper.
Graphs
and
are awesome.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you.
I once made a graph of our D&D campaign. It was great.
Oh.
There's people too, like Jan here. He had undiagnosed ADHD, and it's bad. He has bad ADHD, and he didn't get it diagnosed until like halfway through his last year of university.
How is that possible? I could tell. Just never mind.
I've been telling him for years.
The entire family has it, and so we
I've never
just thought it was
described it.
normal.
Yeah, it just seems normal to them.
I know I had been.
Darius says, but there's a split in the kinds of uni you can go to. There's research-led teaching and vocational teaching. It's very important to understand the pros and cons of to either go to institutions. See, now that might be there is in Britain, but there isn't here in Canada. Like we
Yeah.
have
There's university or technical college.
and applied college.
Just
So
trades.
so just to color all three for you. So applied college is like CDI, DeVry, University of Phoenix. They're basically you could say they're basically vocational. What they are is they're basically teaching dental assistants, hygienists, basic computer IT, and then you have technical institutes which teach trades. Just name a trade. They pretty much that's what their in depth is.
Yeah.
And then the final one is university. And it's funny because in that same scale, you get higher levels of funding. If you're going to a vocational college, the level of funding that at max they're going to give you is maybe $1,000, but vocational college costs as much as university. So you're still paying $3,000 a year, but you're paying, instead of getting like all of it covered by the Canadian government, you're paying $2,000 $2,000 a semester, so $4,000 a year. Where then you go to SATE, and I don't know if
I paid $10,000 for my 2 years of class.
Oh wow, Jan's is really cheap.
my first
$10,000.
my first
My first class was $6,000, and my second my first year was
Ooh.
$6,000.
Now
My
reminded,
second
this is Canadian. This
my
is Canadian, but
first
still.
year,
it was
which will
brutal.
be
IT was $6,000
2 months.
for the help desk shit, and then $12,000 for the full.
Well, I touched on the money about university, not because. Sorry, I just got asked if it was because the failing of the university government. It's not the government's fault that they can't fund the university. No, it's the fact that I'm paying so much, and they can't set me up. They can't set any.
They can't help anybody.
The turnaround rate to find jobs in your field is so low.
Yeah.
It's just that's really what this is about.
I also the fact that we're asking such young people to get into so much debt bothers me like crazy.
not even asking, pushing.
Forcing.
And it'd
Really.
be fine if you could find a
It's
job in your
something
field and wipe out that debt. But
Yeah, exactly.
Good
there's
luck
no-
with that.
But yeah, you might as well find like I said at the beginning of the stream. Like once I graduated, the only job I could find was Starbucks for 5 years,
Yeah,
And-
exactly right.
and
then you
making
getting paid
minimum
so
wage.
low that you can barely take anything. You
Yeah.
can't get
and
out
like
of it.
it's not like I didn't try. I
yeah.
applied for reporting
it's not like it's
jobs,
just
editing
you.
jobs. Like
Like,
I
that's-
applied
that
for
happened.
everything
Okay,
under the
a lot.
sun, but no, unless they if you didn't have a PhD or a huge backlog of proof that you've been doing it for at least 5 years, they didn't want to look at you.
Yeah.
And it's just it's the same story with everyone I know. It's there's no setup for the actual retail world anymore. It's just they take these star-eyed kids, like we said, right out of school, and just put them, and they want you to go straight to university or vocational college and set yourself up for the future. But if you become a dental hygienist and then you realize after 3 years it sucks ass and you hate sticking your fingers inside people's mouths all day,
Right?
like you just wasted a bunch of your money on
and
something.
time.
And
Years of your life.
and who
Yeah, exactly.
who the fuck, except for, I know there are people out there who do, but who the fuck knows what they're doing at 18?
No. No one.
And
No one does. I didn't.
part of it-
I became a cook, so I'd have a job anywhere.
I mean,
part
we
of
all
it
think we do.
as well is
Yeah,
unless you're in like very small town schools, the going into trades is not even really considered a viable option.
Yeah.
The school won't schools just won't even think about it or suggest it to kids. It's just oh no, you need to go to university. No, you need to go to university.
Yeah, it really is.
Small
and
town
everyone's
schools
pushed
where
into like the highest level math and the highest level science when there's reasons that we have lower levels because not everyone is cut out to do that.
And I remember they will do anything that they can to stop you from dropping out.
Yeah.
They just it's so funny because they tell you that you can drop classes whenever you want or you can switch, but they do not like the option of dropping out, even though in Canada you have a reserve of 5 years when you drop out. So if you get accepted to university, that acceptance notice doesn't go away for 5 years, but they'll never tell you that. That's something you learn from asking questions and eventually going to the student body council and asking what are your rights.
I need you to tell me more about that later.
Because you are legally still accepted for 5 years from the time you get your acceptance letter and you say yes. They have to reserve that spot for you.
Okay.
Because that's what a university is supposed to be is. That's why they have a selection process. They supposedly have so many spots, and when you say yes, they put you on a reserve list. And I'm not sure how it is in the States or Britain, but I do know that that's how it works in Canada. And so I don't see why they don't encourage people either to like spend a year off to go find themselves. It's not about the funding that's the problem. It's the fact the universities are just become a charnel pit of meat going in and out and slapping a piece of paper on them and saying this is certified.
Or even, you know, not just encouraging kids to find themselves, but, you know, take a year to, you know, grow up.
So you're proposing
get a full-time job and learn how,
Just
you know,
learn how
the
to be an
real
adult.
world works.
Darius said, so you're proposing that the system works as a conveyor belt from school to uni just to land people in debt and doesn't provide immediate access to jobs. Exactly.
Yes.
That is exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you so much for distilling it down.
And again, working in high school, that's exactly what I see.
Yes, thank you. That is the point I was trying to get across. And it from a visual standpoint, because I used to be a TA in my university as a way to try and get used to using my English degree, and that's what it is. Like, they don't care if the ESL students, whatever language they spoke before English, and they don't care as long as they can write well, so you can understand.
Yeah,
it didn't matter if the English was good, which is like
Pretty
so
important.
what, as long as it's comprehensible. And it just became, and you'd think walking in from a high school, as I'm sure most people think walking in from high school, is you think it's going to be a different atmosphere, and it isn't. It just has a different veneer.
Yeah.
They put a different polish on it.
Yeah. That's what I always thought.
So the problem isn't actually the uni is its largest skill issue, schooling and economic disadvantages.
Yeah. To an extent.
So the problem isn't actually the uni, it's larger scale issues of schooling and economic advantages. You know, I want to say yes, but I feel that university has a problem with selling itself now.
It does.
I don't think economic advantages is a huge deal. Just because you can afford to go to university doesn't mean you're going to enjoy being there. So,
because I
Or
couldn't
even be successful.
Because I couldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to go to university. I still took out loans so I could.
Wasting your money.
It was the expectation I had, and it was never disillusioned. It was never helped. So when I finally graduated and I started going back to my university asking for help, it was just a stonewall.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at that point I'm sitting out there, and I felt like they just squeezed money out of me. And
that's how I felt too.
University sells.
I think the issue is with schooling is the way that they're when they try to prepare you for like worlds and stuff. It's not so much that they're trying to prepare you for like somewhere to be happy and healthy as an adult. They're just trying to prepare you to have a job, and that's it. It doesn't matter what that job is.
I don't think they are preparing you to have a job.
But it's bare minimum though. Like literally, you could be raking the lawn. That's a job.
That's assumed. I think that's a huge problem with everything we're talking about. Is we walked in and there's this idea that it's assumed that they'll be able to give you a job. They don't, but they never. But
they don't give you.
It's almost
So
if you have one, you know how to do it, but you're not going to get one. Good luck.
Saying it's the commodification of education from the university.
Yeah.
I'd really say that's a good way of putting it, because university sells itself as being the only way of being able to make it in life.
It does, yeah. when it's not.
And honestly, university, if you're going to, if you're going into a degree, like in the hard sciences, I can see that. But then you've got all the many other degrees, like history, which I went in for, and you're not getting a job with a history degree. You're getting a push to go in for more degrees to maybe get a job later on.
Just think, Jan's sister was in university until a few weeks ago to do science, to do chemistry. And she dropped out a few weeks ago, which is awesome. It was something she really, really needed to do. Because she has no clue what she wants to do. She knew she wanted to get a chemistry degree. She thought she wanted to. She actually hated every single class she took. But she had no idea what her end goal was. And she had no idea what made her happy in life or what she wanted to do at all beyond that. She has no idea how to live outside of being a student.
See, and that's the thing school should prepare you for, is how to live as a person.
Yeah.
But is that asking too much? Because they're there to educate.
Teaching you about jobs. I mean, yes, there should be. That's what school should be, though, is preparing you for life. You're educators. You're guiding the youth to a better future.
Well,
it's not just it's not just giving them a little bit. You're either going to help them or you're not. And obviously, this isn't helping anyone.
I agree. Any final thoughts before we switch the topic?
I really like what Andrew said earlier about how, Andrew, you were saying you want your work, or like where you get your enjoyment from, to be outside of your work, to be your free time.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
you have a job to pay your bills, right?
I think that's just the dream for anyone. They
Yeah.
want to be able to wake up.
If you're happy with your job, you're not going to be. You're going to look for ways to make it better, to make it progress, to make yourself
very
happy.
Ayn Rand of you.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to in a job that's not, and that doesn't make you feel good. All you're going to see is the negative aspects of it. No matter how much it's paying the bills.
Yeah.
All you're seeing is how deep in the hole you are.
I think there's something to be said too for there's a difference between getting a job you love and working at a job you love and getting your fulfillment from the job you love, or getting a job that pays the bills that you don't hate and getting your fulfillment outside of your job.
Exactly.
Darius said, I mean, the idea of schooling is to bring everyone to the same level of education and to the degree of cultural transmission from norms and values. Funny you should bring that up, because the next topic is collectivism versus individualism.
Yes.
And I will use that as a perfect segue, because I will say the idea, I think you're right, but I believe it's split. I think because of the level of, I think the power of knowledge creates a level of esotricity, which separates sometimes, like even the values of different universities. I mean, not so much here in Canada, but and I'm not sure about Britain, but I know in the States, like every university has its own identity and its own culture and its own form of collectivism. And then there's also universities that push the individual, where you have Harvard or any of the Ivy League. You could even go, say, the London School of Arts or Trinity College in Ireland. It's only the same level of education within that school. And I think that's a huge problem for bad cultural breeding grounds, where you get entire sections of schools that, like, the best example I can. Well, it's funny. I was just going to say the best example I can think of that is actually a high school here in Alberta. There was a guy named Vreend, very well-known guy in the 90s, and he was a history teacher here in Alberta. And he taught that the Holocaust didn't happen, and he did it for 10 years.
I remember that.
And it wasn't until a girl who I know, because I'm part of the Jewish community, I am Jewish. She went to that school and she heard him teaching this in his class, and she actually ousted him. 10 years.
That's crazy.
I had a student from him I didn't know about this guy, but I had a student, one of his students that were, when he was no longer in that school, they might have moved. And legit in our class, this girl said that at one point.
I'm just
And
That's
like,
ridiculous.
half the people in the class are like, "What? Excuse me?"
before we run away with this, my point was,
Sorry, but yeah.
if it doesn't, like, you can have different. It's so big to dude, trust us, we know. We know it's a strange place.
That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah. It's big and empty, really.
But it's weird because then
Not our burning trash.
and nowhere is safe because, like, my sister's private school, one of my sisters went to a very prestigious private school here in Calgary.
Yeah, no kidding.
And one of their teachers was I'm not even going to say his name because he doesn't deserve his name to be said. He was a very prestigious guy, got lots of awards for teaching, was really well acclimated around the world. Turned out that he was taking underage boys from Thailand and raping them and keeping them in his house. And he did that for about 10 years before he got caught. And it's just, and no one, it's this, I guess my point is, people look at collectivism and looked at the idea of that because you're going somewhere, because you're going to these places with these names, you deserve a high level of education, or you're going to get the same level of education, but they destroy the individual. And because of that, you get these horrible people that basically have full reign of their classroom or the culture in their school, and no one can rise against it. And I mean, the current argument I would put against it is with all the different movements going on, especially in North America, whether it be the LGBTQ movement or the Black Lives Matter movement, or sorry, I'm really gassy today, or just the equality movements. I still don't think it's enough. I mean, everyone talks about it being pushed, like, and I don't mean for it to get violent. That's the worst way to do it. I think it's more that everyone is jumping ship and forming another form of collectivism. And it's really funny because I hear all the time, "Oh, I'm an individual, but here's how I identify." And I identify with this group. And let me identify individually, I'm this, but I'm part of this group. And in my mind, I don't understand that. I don't understand, and I'll admit that's a failure on my part not to understand, but I'd be fighting more to the fact that I'd want to be an individual and be my own person and not have to identify with a group. Like, shouldn't we be fostering the idea that people can not just stand up on their own, but can actually take charge on their own and aren't dependent on other people? Or, I mean, I'm not going to say support networks because everyone needs a support network, but at the same time, you have to be able to be comfortable with yourself to let the support network work.
To be who you are and be comfortable with your life and know that you're going in the right direction.
So I guess my point on collectivism and individualism, so I don't just sound like a rambling madman, is collectivism is good, but at the same time, it so easily it's such an enticing thing to fall into and just become enraptured by it and lose yourself into a collectivism idea. And by collectivism, I do mean, but by the collectivism, I do mean social constructs that we create on ourselves. Darian says, I mean, it's fairly natural impulse to be part of a collective. The theories of Dunbar. Yeah. Dunbar and Wilson. It's nice to have you in the conversation. I'm so glad you can actually.
Maybe you
but
should
I
be
would
a
argue,
guest.
I would argue against Dunbar is, like Durkheim and Zimbardo. I mean, you have real life practices with collective groups and the pressures of authority, and it shows how much people are willing to just do what they say because either they want to be part of the group or because they don't want to be identified as the other. And I think, and although you have a good point, especially with Dunbar, I would say that the idea of the individual is become almost villainized. And it's actually why one of the reasons I call this the Villains Talk Show is I try to be an individual and I try to say what it is I understand and how I feel. But at the same time, I get a lot of pushback. But it's fine because I'd rather, the idea of collectivism just kind of scares me because as a Jew, like the first thing I think of is, everyone starts blaming a group of people, not necessarily my people, but any people. As soon as you start blaming that people and becoming a scapegoat, that's a scapegoat for life. And then it then becomes a stereotype. It then becomes a fallback. It then can just go beyond the tipping point. For hate. Yeah, it is. It is an excuse for hate. And it's funny because with what I have in the background, you think I wouldn't care, but like I try to preach the way that if you're going to be
honest, if you're going to be a person who doesn't like somebody and for a reason, don't be afraid to be that way. But if you're going to be someone who wants to be helpful and kind and don't wear a mask of something else. Don't be a shady person trying to be someone nice so you can manipulate more other bullshit. If you're going to be a shady person and you want to be that kind of person who's just rude and be that guy, that's cool. You do you. But don't try to, two-tone it as another person. Be honest about yourself. If you're going to be a dick, you're a dick. That's cool. If you're going to be a nice guy, you can be a nice guy. Or vice versa.
I toe
Everyone
that line.
has their lifestyle.
I'm a dick sometimes. Darius,
and it's honest, right? Be honest with yourself, right?
Darius brings up a good point for us history buffs. Individuals have been villainized since the Colon and the Athenians. The Peloponnesian War was probably the best example of individualism versus collectivism. I completely agree. But it's funny how history turns because you would never get that. Do you know much about the Peloponnesian War, Mr. History?
I know broad strokes, good amounts of it. Probably know more than I think I do because I'm getting. I always get tied up in the specifics of it and forget like names and things like that.
I'll try my best. If I remember what you're talking about correctly, that is
it's Persian Empire against the Greek states. And so you've got
that is the 300, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was talking about. I thank you. I just looked and read. I just wanted to make sure. I don't want to overstep my bounds and be like, oh yes, I know exactly what you're talking about until I'm just. But in that case, if we're talking about the Peloponnesian War, I still agree because it was. You have the individuals of the states of Athens and Sparta, and they came together to fight Xerxes. I believe that was his actual name.
Yeah, Xerxes was the.
But in the end, what is it? Like 50 years later, Sparta fell and became part of Greater Greece. I think it was about 50 years later. Oh, 40? It's 40 or 50 years. Oh, I had to fact check myself before I talk like this. But I know it wasn't too long because of the way the war went. Eventually, Sparta did fall. Sparta won the Peloponnesian War. See, this is why I don't want to talk sometimes.
Because
talking.
There's a whole bunch of wars in that kind of time period and
well, I'll talk more about
area. And thing about Sparta is it was a fairly collectivized place. You go in your class and you're if you're a freeborn Spartan male, you become a warrior, and you're drilled in that from when you're a kid, and you are a Spartan warrior. And honestly, not
and you
much
get
else.
left in the woods, and you have to beat your brothers, and it's tough.
And it was a amazing experiment on if you can make best soldiers. but it was a state that didn't last that long.
I'll admit I'm not good on my my Mediterranean history, but if we're talking about that kind of collectivism versus individualism, I'd say that the Mongolians were better. You have the pinnacle of an individualist army. You pillage for yourself, you take for yourself. They conquered the largest area, at that time, known to man. And the biggest proponent they had to that was the Chinese, a huge collectivist state. It was split between, I believe, 3 states. I used to know all 3, but there are 3 states that essentially work together in a collectivist manner in China. And Mongolia just walked in and showed, but I mean, we're talking about history, which I guess I would be remiss to say history doesn't affect the future, but it's funny. It's funny how many people on an average basis think about history. When I look at the streams and watch people riot in the streets, I don't think they're looking at history.
No.
If you're talking about nomadic raiders, consider how the Viking expansion ended in Daneland, early England, with religious conversion to Christianity. Yeah, you're telling me, bud. That's my clan, actually. We did that. We cut off the heads of Celts. Funny enough, that's my mom's side. But
my ancestors.
But
the ones that you got the heads off of.
But
me too.
I think that just helps my point, because the Vikings, although not completely individualist, they did have a very collectivist mindset. I guess my point is, when we're talking about collectivism versus individualism in today's world, I guess I have to move this up, because we can argue history, and history changes. I mean, Romans were very individualist, but they had a very collectivist mentality. And
you can only look for parts of the past. So.
Yeah. What I guess my point is, in today's world, when we look at collectivism versus individualism, most people will cling to the idea of being a part of something rather than being an individual. And when someone is an individual, they are either terrorized. Like the best example I have is of what I'm talking about is Lady Gaga. As much as I hate her and I don't listen to her music, she's an opera singer who was classically trained. She had done it for years. I'd actually seen her in opera, and I just didn't know who it was. And then she immediately switches to pop, and she completely alienated a huge chunk of her audience for popularity. And people in the opera world thought that as a slight. And I look at that and seeing conforming to collectivism. She was an individual. Her passion was opera, saw that there was no money in opera, and decided to fall under the panopticon and conform. And I guess that's where a huge problem comes. Is I'm not talking about gods per se, but I'm talking about the panopticon and how it would I would think so. It is a used example of a sports team in modern days, but with religious extremes to kill for their god or gods. You're right. Sports teams have become the new religious pantheon, and same with technology. I mean, fucking Twitch.
Nowadays,
yes.
Yeah.
Hardcore, I would argue that economics drives collectivism.
Yes, because I was trying to get to this point. Starbucks. Speaking of Starbucks, there's these protests going on called the protests going on, Black Lives Matter, and I do support that. What I don't support is a month later I see Starbucks employees wearing shirts saying Black Lives Matter, blah 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 blah, which is great, except you have the whitest corporation on the planet based in Seattle putting Black Lives Matter shirts that all the money goes to Tony Howard or whatever his fucking name is.
It became a brand name.
Yeah,
to put on your stores.
But as well,
exactly.
They can have Black Lives Matter pins and things like that. But if one of their employees wants to wear a Trump pin, absolutely not.
I'm not talking about that.
No. I know it's not.
We're
it's
not going near that.
What I'm saying is the main
choice.
people that buy from Starbucks aren't generally Trump supporters, but they are generally Black Lives Matter supporters. So
regardless of who goes, it is a marketing scheme.
yeah, it's 100%.
It is to make Starbucks the whitest company in North America, my coffee company, like seem as if they're on the side of the people. They're adding a collectivist mentality to the corporation. And I mean, I'll touch on it a little bit. I did watch the vice president debate tonight, even though they're not my goddamn president. And it's funny how much both of them just tried to seem to be part of the collective. And it's funny because you'd have presidents in the past, or even prime ministers here in Canada, or prime ministers in Britain, where the idea of the individual and the self-power was massive. I mean, I'm not going to assume what side you're on, but Margaret Thatcher is a name that everyone knows worldwide because of how powerful she was in office. Same with, I mean, the most obvious one was Winston Churchill, but I wasn't going to throw that one out, right? Too. But that's just low hanging fruit. That's just low hanging fruit. So I went with one a little more punchy.
I don't even know who
Margaret Thatcher. Just so I can show that I know what I'm talking about. Was the first female prime minister elected in Britain in the 80s, and she shut down most of the coal mines. A lot of people did not like Margaret Thatcher in Britain.
Was it the coal mines? Or I thought she went after the...
it was the coal mines.
I thought that she went after the...
probably the business.
Why am I forgetting the word? Group of people get together to fight for collective... unions. I thought it was the unions that she was really going hard after, and it led to the shutdowns of most of these coal mines.
But the point is she went after them. The trade unions. Okay, we have our confirmation for trade unions. So you were right, but she was strong. She ran on an individualist platform. Even Ronald Reagan during the laser wars. The Space Wars.
The laser wars.
Sorry, the Space Wars. And it's funny how it's basically been warped. Where even if you want to be an individual, like going back to my original point, like if you want to be labeled as transgender, you can't label yourself as transgender unless you're part of the community. And it's so weird. It's so weird that you have to put it like if you have to basically put a little symbol on you that says I'm this. Like you can't. I don't know how it is in Britain, but like I go to parties now and people ask me how do I identify, and my first answer is it's none of your fucking business. Yeah, you want to call me a fucking she helicopter or a man walrus?
I'll let you know when I get in your pants.
Or you want to call me like whatever the fuck you want, man. You label me. I'm not going to label myself.
My name is John. You can start with that.
She didn't move the energy from coal. She broke up the unions that were controlling the mines.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So and that's a power move. That's something you don't just go to. Like I guess my point was with her, just so we don't get derailed, is she was an individualist character that ran on the idea that she wasn't going to conform. She wasn't going to fall into the collectivism of the unions and how much money. I mean, using lobby groups. I mean, as much as we hate to say it, lobby groups are just legalized corruption. They're just companies that make groups and give money to politicians, and we just say that's okay.
I don't hate to say it.
And then once we say that's okay, and we see other people do it, they're like, "That's corruption." But no, we're not corrupt. We just legalize it. And
if it's a law, if it's not against the law, it's totally okay.
Exactly.
So then, I have a question for you, John. Are you against being collective at all? Against labeling yourself as anything at all? Thinking back to your point about Lady Gaga, I have no idea what her reasons were for changing things. It's entirely possible that it was money. But what if it hadn't been? What if she had changed the type of singing she did because she wanted to?
Then I'm a stubborn cow, and I will admit that. Okay. I am also a very big pessimist in that regard. I don't label myself because I like to put the onus in other people, and I've never been one for change because change is never good. I've lived long enough. I've lived long enough. I've never seen change be good.
I mean, change is ever present, though, John.
Yeah, it is.
It as we speak.
It is ever present, and I understand that. But
unless you're also homeless, then change is something you ask everybody for.
But just to go back to so I've always been an individualist. I've always been my own person, and if people want to box me, that's their fault. That sounds like a them problem, is what I usually say.
That just sounds like they're underestimating me, and I'll use that to my advantage to one-up them if I need to.
That's true, but what if you want to be a part of a box? What if there's a box that you're like, oh yeah, I like this, and I want this?
There's nothing wrong with that. If you make that conscious decision,
just don't make it so everyone else has to be part of it.
If you're making that decision, don't make other people feel invalidated by not making that same decision.
Well, but a huge part of being in a collective is then that you expect everyone else to also be part of that collective.
It's like a cult.
Well, you don't have to. You don't need to expand. A collective could just be an unwelcome acceptance of reality of the situation.
But you're basically expected to join the cult. You're basically expected at that point to just fall in line with everything else they believe. Like if you, let me put
this on an aspect of like, let's look at gamers. Gamers is a cult name that a lot of people use, but that term is so widespread variety that there's fucking politics inside of it all the time of the collectivism of what being a gamer truly means.
That's a great question, Darius. True. Can you be an individualist without a collective? And you know what? Used to be yes, but I would argue that if you don't know who Foucault is, I'd look up Michel Foucault. I'm sure you do, Darius, because you're a psychology PhD. But the Panopticon, I think it's impossible now. It's impossible to be an individual without being part of a collective because someone will box you, someone will do it for you, and then they'll expect you to reflect that. I mean, I'm a metalhead. And I'm sad to say that I do have long hair and I wear black clothes. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I wear bright stuff. And people look at me weird because it's like I'm breaking the narrative.
Yeah, I feel that. when you wear clothes, like I have tattoos and piercings. And when I wear clothes that aren't representative to what someone who has tattoos and piercings, I get the strangest looks. Or I get old people looking at me like I need Christ. It's interesting. I always get the strangest look. Because I don't always wear all pumpkin like metal looking clothes despite having tattoos and piercings.
Sometimes you wear no clothes at all.
Sometimes I wear no clothes at all. It's usually in the shower.
Me too. What a shock.
But sometimes I wear a plaid. Sometimes I wear a suit. Sometimes I wear other things. Depends on the situation.
Well, let's ask Redheaded Santa here.
That's a new one.
Usually it's Ginger Jesus.
You look like we're like a lumberjack from the picture.
Yeah, this is our generic Canadian lumberjack. Please weigh in on the conversation.
That's true.
So many different places
to.
You
don't care.
So many different places.
So you're saying individuality is relative. Sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not, depending on the context.
Yes, I would
but
agree.
At the same time, it's not even you. It's everyone around you.
Other people. Yeah, but that's on their context though too.
Yeah, but that's also part of human nature. We have this thing in our brains where we recognize patterns and we like
human nature doesn't exist.
Human nature.
Human nature is formed by society and can be changed.
Human nature is.
There's no such thing. We are higher level. We are higher level thinking. We have higher levels of education and knowledge and critical thinking. There is no such thing as human nature.
Patterns constantly happen in people's behaviors
because we believe it to be. I think
no, not always. Sometimes
we set our expectations to be that, so we look for it and then we emphasize it. That is what humans do.
Unconscious patterns sometimes happen by people forcing their extension on you.
I think it's the same thing as the brightest light in the room, man. You automatically look up to where the brightest light is in the room.
Look at Darius.
I
Darius
don't.
is a smart guy.
Human nature does not have a lot of ground.
Yes,
in
it
biological-
does.
Does.
Thank
sir.
you!
No.
Yes!
No, you
Yes!
added a not. It does have a lot.
Oh,
Stop adding words. Super. So, anyways.
Don't put words in people's
He's
mouths.
reading, he's reading what he wants to see.
God damn it.
It does, John.
But-
It's like any other nature, any other mammal, they have a nature of biological patterns.
Anyways, where where I'm going to weigh in on this is what collectivism is more, in my opinion at least, where you look at a group and expect and make it, the entirety of your being, and you kind of expect the collective to support and help you. Where when you go to individualism, you support and help yourself. You are, the basis of your being, and then you then can be a part of a group while not losing your individuality. So, Metalheads is a good example of that. You might be into that that style of music, which I am, and dress the part, look the part, without losing your individuality, because that's, how to phrase it properly. You're not relying on the group. You're just a part of it. And really, a huge problem I have with collectivism is that when everybody or most of it is leaning on the group to support them, then who does the actual supporting? So if you look at things like welfare, you sometimes need the collective to help people that can't, for whatever reason, support themselves. But as these systems grow, then people become entirely reliant on the system to help them. And, they look at everything as I'm part of the group. I deserve this help. Where I really believe that the only way to make society work is if people look at it as, I don't deserve help. I need to help myself. And sometimes things happen and I can't support myself, in which case there's there'll be the safety net that will, help you get back on your feet and then push you back into helping yourself, supporting yourself.
So
Exactly.
to touch
I do
on
have one
that,
question on that, though. So,
just to touch on that, Darius brought out the somatic markers. I just looked it up real quick. Funny enough, what you're saying, somatic markers are feelings in the body that are associated with emotions, such as association with rapid heartbeat, with anxiety or nausea or disgust. According to the hypothesis, somatic markers strongly influence subsequent decision making. Within the brain, somatic markers are thought to be processed in the whatever cortex and the amygdala.
Amygdala?
amygdala.
Thank you. And the hypothesis has been tested in experiments using Iowa gambling
Like you're
tasks.
just reading it like a book.
I'm just reading the basics on it, but it seems what Damasio, I think the guy's name is, what Mr. Stone is suggesting, and what he brought up here is that it's super emotion based how we form into collectives. It sounds
So I
like
did have a question on collectivism, though, but you continue with your.
well. I'm Dr. Stone. You definitely are, sir.
You put in the time and the money.
If you've ever seen that anime, sir, you should go watch it. But yes, what Mr. Stone said,
Dr. Stone.
Dr. Stone, thank you. What Dr.
Paid for it,
Stone,
John.
he does have a PhD. I do need to respect that.
I said he paid for it, John.
He paid for that.
He paid for his doctor.
Yeah.
Anyway,
for
It costs money.
what Dr. Stone is basically suggesting is that I think the amygdala is that's not a reptile brain, is it?
I think it might be.
I think because if it is, that makes a lot of sense of why we'd naturally be collective creatures. But my point is, we have reached a point of critical thinking, or at least we should have by now.
Some people have, John.
But I think it's a failure on society that keeps falling back to our
That
collectivist
we can't
nature.
raise the rest of us up to that level.
Yeah,
That's what my problem. That's
literally.
what my issue is.
I mean, and that's what as a science fiction writer, that's what a lot of science fiction is basically based off of. That there's only so, especially Isaac Asimov.
Collectively rise to critical thinking.
How many Isaac Asimov stories are about certain people that think differently than the rest of everyone else, and everyone like. One of his famous short stories in The Nine Tomorrows is about people literally getting knowledge imprinted on their brains, and the people that couldn't have the knowledge imprinted on their brains automatically are actually, they're considered, I'm not going to say smart, but they're considered actually creative. And I think just bring that up. It's even permeated its way into art. I've seen so much art that's just copy upon copy upon copy of itself. And people are just lapping it up because it's the same shit packaged to them, and it's because everyone else has it. I think PopCaps is the best example of that crap. Oh, you're in a PopCap of this person you saw in a TV show. Oh, pay $40 for it.
So are you saying that people shouldn't like things just because other people like them?
No.
No,
Although it
that's
does
what
sound
it
like that.
sounds
It
like.
really
It's-
does
it's
sound like that.
It's like if I could compare like
It
video
really
game
does sound like
movies,
that.
the remake of things over and over again, right?
Yeah, like
You like to get people like to see the things that they knew already because
the
they feel
limbic
more comfortable with the past that was probably equaled with the better time that they remember.
yeah, lots of people like paintings of galaxies. You might notice
Right.
that you have one over there.
I got a galaxy over my window.
But I requested that painting.
That's true.
I did not go to an
I
art
wasn't sure
gallery
what I
with
got.
50 other galaxies and say, I want that one.
You saw me hold up one that I had painted and said, "Can you make one just like that, but with a black hole instead of a sun?"
And it is different. And there you go.
So I did have a question in the way of like collectivism.
Please,
Andrew. So does collectivism are you considered part of the collective if you consciously choose to, or if the collective assumes that you are part of them?
Like accepts you.
I would say
Yeah.
it's both. I think like the idea of the panopticon is that everyone kind of pushes you to do what everyone else does, but at the same time, I think it's also a want. Like Dr. Stone said, it's a want to be part of the collective. It's a want to be accepted, to be venerated as one of them. Like as horrible as it sounds, that scene from that fucking horror movie, one of us.
But on that note, what if you then are? What if say like on a case say where you don't want to be part of the collective, you are quite happily being an individualist, but because of your actions or your perceived daily routine, perhaps somebody else might perceive you as part of their collective based on the similarities that you share.
I mean, when it comes to that, it's who the hell cares what other people think?
No, but then are you still though part of the collective at that point?
So Dr. Stone says it's more about the penalties and rewards in a group and out of group bias. And I agree. It does come down to penalties. What will happen if you don't follow the line? And I'm surprised I didn't even think about that. A lot of social experiments are always about the penalties. You'll get a shock if you do this. You'll be reprimanded if you do this. And I think that is true. I think
Be fined if you do that.
yeah, I think part of being part of the collective is the fear out of it's literally the carrot and the stick. It's been so ingrained in society that people are automatically trying to stay on everyone's good side. And it becomes so disingenuous that you have an entire country that's south of us that's tearing apart at the seams because they don't know who's on their side. And you can't tell who's on the right side or who's on the wrong side when it's not about sides. It's about
living and existing.
It's about a misunderstanding in people's the word would be not ideology.
Perception.
Yeah, thank you. Perception.
There's also I can't remember what this experiment was, but the basics of the experiment was they would put a person into a room to take a test, and then partway through the test they would start pumping smoke into the room, and when there's a person in there on their own, they would go check the door, do all that.
Yeah, I was going to say Milgram.
And then, do everything that's been ingrained into them. But then they put other people into the room taking the test, and then they pump the smoke in, and the person in there taking the test look around, see everyone else taking the test not paying attention to the smoke, and they would just get back to it and ignore the smoke. Nobody else is doing it. Why would I be the odd man out?
That makes me so laugh. I have people at my work that tell me this because, like, I'm smart enough at how to do my job, and like I understand proper storage and shit. And people aren't doing certain things like that at my work. And then I had one dude come up to me. He's like, "You're the only one that does that, right?"
Well, maybe you shouldn't be.
Just because I'm the only one that does it doesn't mean I'm not stupid enough to understand what I'm doing is correct. So I'm not going to stop just because you're not doing it. That's your problem, sir.
Good response.
So
I appreciate that in people who are making food.
Dr. Stone said there's inter and intra relationships between groups. So sometimes it's about the rewards, a bias towards your group, then a penalty from another group. He pointed out that you were talking about Milgram, and I'm guessing an answer to you, Andrew, was that's about saving cognitive resources, and it's fairly efficient mechanism for evolution. Yes and no, because humans, just on that last part, I would say humans decided in their evolutionary stages to use the idea of intelligence to keep, like, we're one of the only things in the world that builds shelters. And I think the idea that we should be able to use our one advantage that Mother Nature gave us to actually stay advanced and stay to the point where we're actually, I don't want to say survival, but like the same
I'd like
time.
to say a type 2 civilization one day.
Yeah, one day. But I think what's holding us back is the primal instincts that we have that we can't seem to shake. And I think the problem is now we exonerate them. Now we no, that's the right word.
We highlight,
praise, exonerate, yeah. We exonerate them. And I think like where we should be, like, if I guess what I'm trying to say is I would argue for collectivism on the idea that we're all human. And anytime we further subdivide that, we're taking precious intelligence and precious thinking power away from things that would support the individual at a smaller scale rather than supporting smaller and smaller and smaller groups, further segregating us. It's why I bring up the whole argument between collectivism and individualism, because it's hard to come down on a side where I can say for full certainty that we don't need a collective, but at the same time, you can't survive on your own. It's how much
you need a group to survive, but collectivism is more about relying on the group to survive rather than relying on yourself. And that's one of the failings of collectivism is it tends to lead to people relying on the group. So yes, you do need a group to survive. You can't do everything on your own.
I think as people, we need a healthy amount of both, but not to the point where it becomes a dependency.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's far easier to grow a dependency on the collective than it is to grow a dependency on yourself. Because
definitely, because the other people are doing it, right? As long as everyone else is doing it, I can be like, oh man, he's not doing his shit right, so I'm not that bad, right?
Yeah.
There's always an excuse if somebody else says it works.
Or more, it's, well, nobody else is doing anything, so why should I do some stuff?
I like that point. Consider it this way: the health of the group versus the health of the individual. I completely agree. It is the health, and it's funny how it says versus the health of the individual, but I think it's linked in such a way that if you can balance it well,
then it actually works in actually elevating our society. The problem is people exploit it. It's the ultimate nice guy problem. You have a nice guy who's incredibly
Do you
intelligent.
return the shopping cart?
No, it's more that you have a nice guy in business who's super nice, and he never makes it anywhere in his company because everyone who steps over him, he lets them do it. And it's the idea that if people work together, they can all raise the company together. But as long as, I forget what that actual...
Sean, this is the shopping cart debate. Do you ultimately return the shopping cart? It is
No.
gives you no
If you see a shopping cart in a parking lot, do you return the shopping cart?
No,
I'm finished using it.
What I'm talking about is it Rooks versus Crows? I'm thinking of the four square debate in politics. You have two squares where you get nothing and you get everything, and then two other squares where you share the half with someone else. The idea is if you pick share and they pick everything, you get nothing.
Oh, right.
If you pick everything and they pick share, you get everything. The question is, the only way to guarantee you both get half is if you both pick share. But if one of you picks everything, the other one gets nothing. And it's the idea that most people are going to... Thank you, the prisoner's dilemma variation. That's what I was looking for. It's the prisoner's variation. Do I do this and share with my fellow man or my fellow prisoners and get out together? Or do I take advantage for myself and get out myself, but screw everyone else? And in the end, it'll be twice as good for me if I can do that alone, but I can still get the same result though with half the value if I do it together. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It is a kind of game theory, Dr. Stone. And it's what I'm really trying to get at is do you fight for the individual at the same time knowing that everyone else will fight for the individual? So because that's the other thing. If both people pick double it, go for themselves, then they both get nothing.
Yeah.
So it's do we at what point can we find a balance between collectivism and individualism that people can still be by themselves but not have to fully identify in these micro groups to the point that it's just become if you ever seen Warriors, it's just become that. It's just there's people who watch sports and they're in their own little clique, and then there's people who are gamers in their own little clique, and then there's people and it's just eventually everyone's going to start wearing face paint and walking around with baseball bats and lead pipes in the streets of New York with one guy who goes, "Can you dig it?"
You are a pessimist.
Yeah, I really am. Dr. Stone says, I think that only works as a prediction for collectivism versus individualism if the rules are understood in the scenario.
Yeah.
I guess you're right. I'm being too vague. But I think my point is in general, what point is... I mean, it's such a stupid thing to ask, but what point is a good balance? At what point does the buck stop getting pushed from one side to another that we actually find a mutual growth? Because you could argue I would say the last 20 years have been the most stagnant since like the early 1800s. Not in terms of technology, but in terms of human progression. I mean, if you think back to the 1600s, the idea of the Renaissance and the Revolution became a whole new level of thinking in terms of ideals. And then you get the slump in the early 1800s, and then you get the Industrial Revolution, and you get the idea behind the collective and the proletariat. And then you had a whole new bunch of different theories that started to come out through social practices, either through Durkheim, through Milgram, through Zimbardo, through Foucault. You could even say Auden, Ayn Rand, and George Orwell, Dostoevsky, and
then all of a sudden you reach Francis Fukuyama saying the end of history, and then he writes another one 2 years later saying the restart of history.
Well, you're you're looking at a very short period in cognitive growth that's after a huge long span of
Very little.
So, I mean, when you're comparing the growth in past 20 or so years to the growth then, sure, it seems to be very slow. But if you compare it to before that, it's still, growing. Part of the problem, I think, is that huge leaps forward is,
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and if you progress too quickly, then you'll inevitably lead to massive breakdowns in parts of society, because if you're moving too fast, then you can't say that, oh, this one thing that we've changed over here is working, while this other part is this other side is not. If you grow more slowly, then you can try a small change, and if it works, then yeah, you keep it, and if it doesn't work, then you can ditch it.
I'll come back to that. Dr. Stone says most innovations that drive human behavior come from advanced communication, wheel, fire, telephone, etc. And that's, I've argued that definitely before in a few arguments, that everything comes with progression. But I mean, you could argue that sometimes we leap ahead of technology. I mean, the idea of the cell phone is the easiest one. And we kind of then rise to that occasion because of the idea. That's where science fiction idea basically comes from. And then you have the other way around, where you'll have technology so far ahead that humanity has to catch up to it. And I think it's definitely favored one side more than the other. But my point is, I think humanity, especially in the last 20, 30 years, has, from what I've seen and from what I've studied, is become more drawn to the collectivist as a way to stagnate. It's almost like everyone's focused on being part of a group rather than fighting or defining who they are. It's almost like that entire identity's gone, like to the point where the only people who are famous or have their own self-identity are essentially people who do the craziest things. And that's really what it's kind of centered around. I mean, the easiest ones to say is Trump, but you could also look around Europe and Canada and see the same shit. It just takes different ideas, and people either galvanize with them or galvanize against them. And then it draws battle lines.
Though you can't really
I'm all over the map. I'm sorry.
You can't really see what it's difficult to see progression when you're in the middle of it. I mean, we know that there was a huge amount of progression in ways of thinking and philosophies in the Renaissance, but people living in the Renaissance, maybe the thought leaders could see it, but the majority of people living then were, just continuing their same daily lives, working to, survive. It's incredibly difficult to see change when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, loudmouths will always be, famous, easy to see, and big collective groups will are necessarily loud. I mean, when you have a ton of people all saying the same thing, it will be far louder. So it could be that while the collective group seems to be trying to stagnate things, that all these silent individuals are still pushing things forward. I may have completely contradicted myself in that. I don't know, but
a little. Dr. Stone brought up a point. The conflict or resources of the groups should surely lead to advances that they compete, i.e. space program from the Cold War. And they could literally see it in the Renaissance, surely as it was a move of depicting humans in the same form of God. And you're right. I mean, I can't argue that human progression didn't spurn not just out of conflict, but out of the idea of higher levels of thinking through conflict. But I mean, I guess my point is I'm kind of holding a gun to people who say that humans are better than that, or humans will progress different than that. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying show me. If I can sit here in my armchair philosophy and come up with these ideas that seem radical, but at the same time make more sense than drawing battle lines in the sand over who identifies as what, or how people are referred to as each other. Like, I think it's not fair. But at the same time, I mean, it's not fair to me to put the onus on me to identify. It's more that prove to me that what you're doing is right, and it's not leading to conflict. I mean, because that's all I see it leading to. I watch these live streams every night before I go on, and it's the same places, L.A., Milwaukee, Kenosha, Portland. And all I see is raising tensions, and lots of people screaming, but no one listening. And so it's at that point, like, what's the point of starting a dialogue when everyone's just trying to diatribe at each other? No one's trying to actually sit and listen. Everyone's seeing themselves as the right, and that anyone who is against them is just wrong. And they're not taking time to actually do what they say and be collective in a constructive way. And they're fighting against the idea of the individual being able to make their own decisions. You have to make your decision based on informed opinions that everyone else is giving you, when they're just as ill-informed as everyone else. Dr. Stone says this is probably because of the division of resources and the resulting conflict that claimed him. It's not even resources at this point. It's unfortunately become an ideological battle.
It has, yeah.
And that's the worst, because there is no flag to stamp down and say I've won on this. Ideological battles will be fought for life. If people don't believe in what you're talking about, then it doesn't matter how much fact you throw at them, how much actual legitimate research or scientific proof you throw at them, they'll still tell you the earth is flat. And it's at that moment the only answer you have is, oh, so you believe in space, do you? You're one of those types. You meet them with something equally as absurd, and you see how they react. Because if they can't deal with the absurd and then look at you in that way, hopefully you'll at least get somewhat of a machine going. But I think that's a great way to color my argument is the idea that you can't. If someone believes the earth is flat, then the earth is flat, no matter what you tell them. Someone believes the moon landing is fake. It doesn't matter how much I throw at them and how much I believe that it isn't, how much they believe it. They'll always believe it was faked by whoever and whatever narrative fits them best. And it's like, at what point, and do I just give up? Because that's my first thought, is just give up. Give up and let them spin. But the problem is then more people start to listen. And the more people start to listen, the more people spin that narrative. And the more people spin that narrative, the more it then becomes infactual history. I mean, that's how you get things that people remember wrong. Like in Casablanca, where they say that she says play it again, Sam, except she never fucking says it. It's just wrong narrative. And I think that's a detriment of collectivism versus individual, where I could even go on the other side of the argument and say the detriment of being an individual is you sometimes build an esoteric wall. Is really what I was trying to get at with the other one, is you can build yourself so much as an individual that then you hear people who legitimately have an emotional issue, but they can't describe it well to you, but because you are so sure on yourself that you just dismiss them. And I think that's a problem. That's a huge problem with oh God, I'm talking way too much.
So you could also look at it as, look at
the Mandela effect. That's what it's called.
Who's looking at you could look at it as
Did I not
who's
say that out loud?
Fighting for, gender pronouns to be needed, or who's burning down cities versus everybody else that's just sitting back from the argument and kind of looking at it as what are you arguing about? I do have to wonder, how can this particular I guess ideology or phase, can it last, or will it turn out to be more of a fad? Because majority of people who, hardworking individuals that care more about, just living, will just, not follow along with it, or, at most pay it lip service. I mean, this whole thing could just be, the hippies again.
So I gotta sign off soon. So any closing thoughts? I guess mine would be, don't go to university for a year, take some time off.
Yes.
And fight the power, but don't fight too much.
Figure out what you like and do that.
Before you try and change the world, start
Jeremy,
by cleaning
Andrew?
your room.
Anything you wanna say as a closing statement? Hello?
Lose
Not
them?
necessarily.
Yes?
He said not necessarily.
Okay. Then after that, thank you, Jan, for joining us. Thank you, Sarah, again for being on. And thank you, Miss Dr. Stone, for your comments and for your
Hello? Oh, okay.
Oh.
Should you mute
Sorry.
yourself?
you muted
I was gonna
yourself.
say don't do drugs.
That's a good one.
Good closing comment. I like it.
But yeah,
Drugs are bad. Hey.
thank you, Jeremy, for being on. Thank you, Insaniac, who are on the comms. Like I was going to say, thank you, Dr. Stone, for coloring this conversation. It was kind of nice. And yeah, this was the Villains Talk Show, starring everyone here except this guy. And this is where everyone does their plugs. You can find me at _panopticon on Twitter. And that's my Twitter.
Find Insaniac Twitter, Twitch, or Mr. Insaniac on YouTube. Check out some gaming videos and some other live stream stuff.
I'm not that exciting.
You'll find me here for the most part.
You can find me in schools sometimes. That's pretty cool.
And
But maybe don't.
the next live stream stream will be Sunday. It will be my mother. She is a psychic, and she's also reads tarot. So I'm going to entertain that with she's going to do a psychic reading, and we're going to talk about her belief in magic.
I want
And-
to. Can I do?
Oh, you guys
she'll
are
probably know.
so invited to that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I have
Oh.
I
I
have
am
tarot
so-
cards. Can I pull the cards and she?
I
can
mean,
give her,
let's
her
do it.
reading?
This is happens same time. Thank you, Darius, for the follow. And I hope everyone has a great night. I'm, like I'd like to say, I'm sorry that you had nothing. Sorry that you had nothing better to do, but thank you for watching.
You need an outro, John.
That is it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had nothing
That
better
has
to
been the
do.
outro so far. Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, Darius, if you come, since you followed, you send me a private message, and I will. I'll bring you into the Discord, man. It'd be nice to have some
Outside. Yeah.
Yeah, an
Yeah.
outside opinion. Someone from not Canada.
that again. I am Jay Aftergood. We're always watched over by the great likeness behind the screen.
Thank you, great likeness.
Oh, praise the great likeness. And yeah, everyone have a great night.
Bye.
Okay, that was a good one.
Yeah,
I didn't know she was a psychic.
me neither.
Yeah,
And